computer. All right. So, first off, thank you for joining us. It's great to see you again.
Hey, what's up, guys?
Yeah. So this is I'll introduce this is Michael Carson. Michael is originally from Rochester. He was a graduate from Brockport, I believe, exercise science, right?
Exercise science and kinesiology.
Okay, exercise science and kinesiology. And the reason Michael is joining us is that Michael is an undefeated kickboxer. So I believe you were 20-0 as an amateur, and then what'd you get up to so far in the pros? Was it 6-0?
So far, I've had two pro fights.
Two pro fights. Okay,
So
so
I
you're,
was 22-0.
okay, perfect. So you're 22-0. Recently, this past spring or summer, you moved down to Virginia to train at Lloyd Irvin School, which is one of the internationally known places to train in mixed martial arts. Lloyd Irvin is a famous coach. So we're just gonna. I have a ton of questions that students sent in. A lot of really good questions. We're just gonna work through them, see how far we get. I promise to take about 50 minutes of your time. So I don't want to take up your whole day. I know you were just off running your training, so you probably want to
Yeah.
do other things. But yeah, thanks again for joining. I'm always excited. Usually you get to stop by in person, but hopefully next spring you'll be able to actually come by again in person.
Right, man. I'm hoping so, man. I'm hoping so. I'm just tired of keeping myself isolated and being in the house all the time.
Yeah.
It's like I work at a gym. Literally, I'm not training. I'm working. Either way, I'm at the gym. I can't be at the gym doing that. Really love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah,
Cool.
let's get started.
All right. So first question. And the first few questions are all about kind of your origin story, how you got into this particular lifestyle, this career. So
Mhm.
how did you first discover any type of combat sport?
So I started doing martial arts when I was 7. I started taking Taekwondo as a kid. Like I used to always watch like martial arts flicks and Power Rangers and Ninja Turtles and stuff like that with my granddad. And I was just so in love with martial arts after seeing the movie Iron Monkey.
Okay. Yeah.
Afterward, as a kid, I would not stop talking about it to my granddad, and he eventually signed me up for Taekwondo, and just started from there.
Do you remember when you first saw the UFC or just any MMA fight?
Yeah, I think I had to be maybe like in like 10th or 11th grade around that time. Like I seen a UFC event. I think it might have been Tito Ortiz versus Chuck Liddell. It was a
Okay.
knockout.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was like a little 30-second commercial. And once I seen it, I was like, what the hell is that? Like,
When you saw it, did you ever imagine that that would be a path that you could also actually take? Because at this point, you would have been doing Taekwondo for what, like 8 years or something by the time you actually saw a UFC fight. So it's a little bit different than
yeah.
Taekwondo. When you saw it, were you like, oh, that could actually be me in the octagon? Or were you just like, that's a different world?
I thought honestly, like I kind of thought both. Like I thought like, I wonder if I could see myself doing that at times. And then I also thought like, I'm so invested in doing Taekwondo. This is like what I do. So maybe if I get really good at this, I can eventually try that.
Okay.
But
So it didn't
yeah,
seem like something so out there. Like that was actually maybe
yeah,
that's.
it didn't seem too far fetched. The
Mhm.
idea, you know, the idea of it didn't seem too far fetched. But like immediately when I seen it, it's not like I said like, yo, I want to do
Okay, cool.
that.
Did growing up in Rochester impact your career choice at all? Sometimes people like to talk about, I grew up in this situation and that made me realize that I definitely need to do this type of thing. Other people say, that it just happened to be a pursuit that I took, it had nothing to do with my background.
Mhm.
But did your upbringing at all shape you into taking this path?
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, man. Like I feel like my upbringing in Rochester definitely influenced my decision to um be a fighter as well as like, just do martial arts in general. Being in my neighborhood, the school I went to, and just being like the culture that I was in, you just had to know how to defend yourself at that time. And, taking martial arts definitely showed me a way that I can do that, as well as like being able to get like, a lot of stress off of the kid. Martial arts was definitely a way to be able to doing that. It was an outlet for me because I may have not been good as other sports or at other sports like how other kids were that were in my environment. I
Okay.
wasn't the best, say like basketball player, but I was really good at this doing this sport, and it made me feel good, and it also brought these other great benefits. So I'm just gonna stick with this.
Mhm.
And it was in my area, because I could have grew up doing karate or grew up doing freaking yoga. It was just an option that I had. So
Oh, okay.
Rochester definitely influenced my choice of doing martial arts a lot.
So were you getting into fights when you were younger, or was it just that there was always that threat of potential violence, so you wanted to be more confident in handling yourself?
Because there was that threat, because I definitely got into a lot of fights as a kid
Yeah.
and growing up in Rochester. And because it was that threat of always having to go in through that or having to go through that, I knew that like, I need the upper hand. So I need to continue doing martial arts, you know,
Mhm.
because nobody likes to lose a
Yeah.
fight. Nobody likes to get their ass kicked. So, it was just something I had to
Yeah, it's kind of a funny pattern because a lot of the great
know.
fighters in mixed martial arts, you hear like George St. Pierre tells these stories about how when he was young, he used to be bullied by people and get beat up by people, and that motivated him to
Mhm.
get stronger and to get better. And you don't hear it the other way. Although I guess you probably went, if you were the bully, you might not share that story. But it's often when people are getting in fights, if you're winning every fight when you're young, you're not that motivated to go learn to get better. But knowing that there's violence, losing a few fights, that can kind of shape and be like, all right, this is something I actually need to know how to do.
Yeah, exactly. It's something you definitely want to know how to do because like if you get into a fight and you get really, real hurt, that's gonna really suck for the future. It might be something like, all right, I need to know what I'm doing just in case when I get into that situation again, I know how to handle it.
Mhm. Where in
You know,
Rochester did you grow up? Uh,
on the east side by like Portland Avenue and Clifford Avenue.
Oh, okay, okay, yeah.
Hmm.
Um, so you also have a background in wrestling, right?
Yeah,
How did you get into wrestling? Was that through school, or how did you find that?
yeah. I started wrestling in high school. So like, my grandfather told me the story when he used to wrestle in high school about how like he learned how to wrestle and he had he was trying to explain to me some move and he was telling me I should do that. Excuse me. In my taekwondo gym, and I was explaining to him like, I can't really do that. We're just having like
Yeah,
a uh, a philosophical conversation about different combat techniques. Me and my grandfather do that, and he was telling me how
yeah,
I used to wrestle basically.
yeah. And
So,
and
and this
that's
is
like
probably like,
older guys love to tell people how to fight.
yeah,
That's like a tradition.
yeah. Because if you think about it, they know because they've probably been in some more fights.
Yeah.
You know, like your granddad has lived long enough where he's probably seen more
Hmm.
action than you have. Essentially,
Hmm.
not to say like you if you're a person who just always gets in the fights. So
Yeah.
everybody has like an anomaly, but I'm just saying
Hmm.
on average.
Yeah.
You know? But so my grandfather was telling me about the story about him wrestling, and like it sounded really fascinating. So I was like, man, I should definitely try that. And in eighth grade, I decided to try to play soccer, right? And I didn't make the tryouts. I just sucked at soccer. I was terrible.
Hmm.
I did not know what the fuck I was doing with getting the ball. But
Yeah.
so I decided like, oh man, I want to get into shape. I need to do something. So I tried to do wrestling because I tried to play football before, and I thought I really wanted to be good at football, and I knew that people who played football also wrestled during the off season or when they couldn't do it. So my grandfather was like, "Yeah, you should." My grandfather also was like, "Hey, you should try that." So I signed up for modified wrestling. I went to a wrestling practice, and the first day, the wrestling coach like whooped my ass. Like wrestling wise, obviously. Like,
Yeah.
throwing me in like
Yeah.
firemen's and arm spins and like different like, carries and throws and stuff. He really like he really opened my eyes and humbled me so much that it made me want to because
Yeah.
I was so used to doing taekwondo up until this point. So I had been doing it maybe about like I don't know, 5 to 7 years because I'm in like eighth grade. And in eighth grade, how old are you? You're like what, 14?
Yeah. Eighth grade. That sounds about
Yeah,
right.
it'd be like
Yeah, like 13 or
about like
14. Yeah.
14, 13, 14. And I had been doing martial arts since I was 7. So
Hmm.
maybe like 6 or 7 years at that. Taekwondo was all I know.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking every combat situation is like Taekwondo. I mean, I have that filter. So when
Yeah.
I started wrestling, the first day when I am asked it, the coach kind of opened my eyes to that. And it also made me look at MMA differently because
Yeah.
like they eventually influenced my decision as well because they used to always like kind of put that bug in my ear like, hey man, you ever thought about doing
Mhm.
MMA? You'd be pretty good at it. Blah blah blah. So, yeah.
So one of the things that we talk about in class is how the culture surrounding different sports varies, right? So
Hmm.
there's a different culture that surrounds soccer versus gymnastics versus football versus basketball. I'm wondering, you were moving between taekwondo and wrestling. Did you feel like the it's kind of a vague question, but did you feel like the culture was different, like who the people were or what the expectations were, how people interacted with
Absolutely.
each other? Like, what were some of
Yeah,
those differences that stuck out to you?
absolutely. So some differences in like say the taekwondo community and the wrestling community.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, so well, the wrestling community like is very tight knit. It's usually the community is a lot smaller because the competition's pool is a lot smaller in the
Okay.
designated area. You know what
Hmm.
I mean? So like,
Yeah.
and also where I was from, like in Rochester, in the city, not a lot of kids from the city wrestle.
Yeah.
So our teams are sometimes a little bit smaller than say like the suburban. And culture wise, like the idea of being a wrestler is a little bit different than being like say a taekwondo martial artist, where like in taekwondo we were raised on different tendencies or
Hmm.
principles, which was being courteous, showing integrity, perseverance, having an indomitable spirit, and having self-discipline. Right?
Hmm.
I think I named it. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
it
in
sounds.
wrestling, that's five, right?
Yeah, I think so.
In
I'm
wrestling,
trying to count it in my head now.
yeah. So those and like martial arts, like taekwondo, those are the principles that the art is based on. You know, and for you to level up, or for you to rank up, you would need to know like various techniques, various ideas behind the philosophy of taekwondo and the martial art itself. Wrestling's a little bit more. We just want you to be tough and gritty and work
Yeah.
really hard, and that's the like discipline and the idea that wrestling is teaching. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? They
that's
both kind of
interesting.
can yeah, they both intertwine because a lot of those principles that they teach you, you know, work in both sports, but it's more like Taekwondo outlines it and highlights each step. That's why like you
Yeah.
get a belt because there's
Yeah.
different levels that is showing you to go through. Wrestling is more or less the levels, it's not necessarily the same because it's a sport essentially.
Mhm.
It's just one sport. So you have the modified level, varsity, and junior varsity. But in Taekwondo, it has more than just a sport aspect. It has a life aspect.
Mhm.
So the mentality behind a lot of the things that they're teaching you is a little bit like they still want you to work hard, but it's
Yeah.
not drilled into you like wrestling. How wrestling drills you to work hard and to be tough because the sport itself is also more physical as
Yeah, so
well.
there's in both cultures there's discussion of why you're doing the thing you do, but in wrestling it's like you want to be a good wrestler, so you just need to be tough, you need to not give up, you need to have endurance, and that's the conversation. And in Taekwondo there's a lot of discussion, more kind of like traditional stories about what a good human is, right?
Yes, yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So you got into wrestling in high school.
Hmm.
How did you end up getting back into kickboxing, right? Because it seemed like you were going the route where you discovered this new
Hmm.
thing, but you took a break from grappling for a while, right? Now you're just getting back into it
Hmm.
as you're learning, as you're transitioning to MMA. But why did you go back
Right.
from wrestling to striking combat art?
So I'd say from eighth grade to college, my junior year, I was wrestling. Right. I
Mhm.
thought like I eventually like through the grapevines, like I thought that I wanted to go to the Olympics for Taekwondo. I thought like, you know what, I'm just gonna try to be an Olympian in Taekwondo. And eventually around like my freshman year in college, I just had the idea like, you know, this is not gonna work. Like I just want to keep wrestling. Wrestling is fun. It can give me a scholarship. I can probably go somewhere. And there's a possibility that maybe I can try mixed martial arts to do UFC. But the idea that I had around when I was 18 or 19, it wasn't as strong as it was towards the end of my wrestling career. So what happened with that? Excuse me, sorry.
Mm.
So what happened with that was I was just wrestling in college. So from I say like my sophomore year, no, my freshman all the way up to my junior year, I was wrestling in college, and I found myself at Brock.
Mm.
And I was working on getting on the team, you know, just practicing with them, going to the classes, working out, blah blah blah. And in
Mm.
class, I ended up hurting my knee, and I hurt my knee in the spring semester of my junior year, and I was out for like 2 to 3 months just on crutches.
Mm.
And prior to this, periodically, I would stop at different gyms, mixed martial arts gyms in Rochester to stay in shape during the during the off breaks from college. So like when we went home for winter break for that month, I would
Yeah.
just go take a 30 day. I'd take a 30-day trial. Or
Yeah.
like when we'd have summer off, I'd go somewhere take a 30-day trial and just
Yeah.
bounce from gym to gym. Right. I
Yeah.
was curious about it, but it wasn't as strong. It wasn't something where I was like, I definitely want to do this right now. So fast forward back to when I had hurt my knee in the spring semester. I hurt my knee in the spring semester wrestling in a class, and I was out for about 2 to 3 months. And during that time, I started having some really weird dreams, and these dreams basically gave me the conclusion that I should try something besides wrestling because I'm not going to be going
Yeah.
anywhere with this. I'm just kind of like beating around the bush. I'm not going where
Yeah.
I want to go.
So your subconscious was
So
telling you to stop wrestling.
yeah, yeah. So when my leg got better, I decided like, you know what, I need to get back in shape. Let me go back to one of those gyms that I had, was training at during like the winter and summer break. One of those gyms is called this gym called Bedrock MMA. And I stopped in Bedrock for like a month. I did 30 days there, and then I eventually like, you know what, I'm just gonna stay here. I probably trained there for like 2 to 3 months, and the coaches had approached me after one practice and was just like, "Hey man, you want to try to fight?" And I just kind of said, sure. Then, I mean, maybe I think this was around June or July of that same
Mhm.
semester. So we had just gotten out in May. So I had been off the summer for maybe like 1 or 2 months. So I decided to, go back to Bedrock. And around June or July is when they asked me if I wanted to fight. And I took a fight that August. And I ended up winning my first fight.
Wow.
And
So pretty
afterwards, I'm
pretty
like, you know what?
fast. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And afterwards, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to fight. I like doing this. This is pretty fun. And wrestling, I'm not really, it's not really going the way I would like
Yeah.
at
All
this
right,
point,
I've got two follow-ups.
Mhm,
Why what did you like about the you said that the fight was fun. What did you
mhm.
like about taking a fight and going through that experience? Because a lot of people,
So,
right, they do one fight and then they're like, I'm good, I did the one fight, I'm never gonna do this again. Um,
mhm,
it helps that you won, obviously. It might have been a different story
yeah,
if you lost your
definitely,
first fight,
definitely.
but
Right.
like what did you like about the experience of taking a fight, building up to the fight, and then and actually going through with it?
Okay, so one, I really like the training because this is a point in time where like the training was mostly focused on me, and it allowed me to develop in certain areas that I really wanted to perfect. Compared to with wrestling, you didn't always get that opportunity because you practice in a huge team environment. And unless you had like a private coach or someone like that to meet with you all the time, the only times you would really practice is in practice with the rest of the team.
Hmm.
And you can only do so much when you have a coach per se that's dictating how the time goes or has the itinerary for practice every time.
Hmm.
When you're fighting on your own, it's just you in there. So essentially, you're putting together most of the training camps, or you're working with someone who's working around your life schedule and what you want to do. Another thing I liked about fighting, like doing kickboxing compared to wrestling, is that the fact that I was allowed to displace a skill that I was very fluent in from such a young age. So a lot of the things came naturally, and I was very good at it. And it just also gave me a different, what's the word? It gave me a different, I guess, like sense of humility or like a power. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Because wrestling, I was pretty decent. I'm not gonna sit here and say I was the best wrestler in
Hmm.
high school and college. I was decent, but when
Yeah.
it came to martial arts and the sport of like kickboxing, I just excelled in it. And I felt like I can be a superstar in this sort of world compared to wrestling where I was just okay.
Yeah.
So a lot of times when you're not that good on a college team, whatever the sport is, you may just kind of get swept under the radar. I mean,
Yeah.
people don't really notice you. You know what I mean? Different stuff like that.
Yeah.
And what else? Yeah, yeah, that's pretty much
Did
it.
you when you made that choice to
Mhm,
take a kickboxing match and choose to go that route with your life, did you get
mhm.
any how did your family react? Was there
Oh,
any
one more
skept
thing.
Oh
One more
yeah.
thing I want to add. There's one thing I liked about kickboxing compared to wrestling. The crowd is way more people. It's,
Hmm.
it's you notice like you have way more support in that community.
Yeah.
Wrestling community is not that big. The only people who like to wrestle or watch wrestling are people that. When it comes to a fight, everybody wants to see a fight.
Yeah.
I had a wrestling match. I'll probably have like 10 people come out. I have a fight. I'll probably have like 300 to 500 people come out. So
Yeah.
it's that kind of like gives you
Yeah.
added motivation and support.
And
But with my family, oh, I'm
yeah,
sorry. What
and
were
I
you
want
gonna
to
say?
come back to that point in a little bit because that's one of the things I'm curious about with your move. you've chosen to leave Rochester, go train at a bigger gym, thinking about your future opportunities, but you're leaving behind. Actually, maybe I'll just ask it now. Like you've chosen to
Okay.
go at train at a bigger gym.
Hmm.
One of the things, one of the sacrifices is when you were competing in Rochester, it was a big deal. So I went to one of your fights. I think it was your last fight in Rochester. But
Yeah,
when
in
you came
February.
out, yeah, when you came out, people were excited, right? I mean, there was a huge
Hmm.
crowd. People were chanting your name. People were stomping. You represented Rochester going against a person. I think he was from, might have been from Toronto. Is that right?
Yeah, from Toronto.
Um, and when you won, everyone went crazy, right? So that's you were the center of attention there. Now you're
Hmm.
going to a gym where you're not the center of attention in the same way. People don't know who you are in Virginia. Was it hard to leave Rochester where you had achieved a little bit of a celebrity status, right?
Hmm.
So was that a
Um,
tough thing to sacrifice?
no, it really wasn't because essentially, like, I have other motivations than just trying to be like, popular and be a celebrity. I also just want to be great in that sport. And going somewhere where no one knows you, it one shows you the support that you had back at home and it makes you value it a little more. And two, it also gives you the motivation to build it where you're at, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Like I don't know anyone here. So being that I don't know one here, I can have a fight, I can gain some popularity, and from there it shows me that I can build. And if I, plant the seed here and I move somewhere else and plant a seed there, I don't just have the support of Rochester now. I have the support of Rochester and the other two places that I planted my seed. So essentially my fan base grows larger.
Hmm. And that so that
Um,
reset and that reset probably helped with the motivation also, right? It showed that
yes,
you needed to take
yes.
that next step. Okay.
Yeah, it showed me that I needed to take that next step. And it showed me like, um that because there's different levels, you need to be able to work your way to that level if you want to be something, which is the best. And that's what I want to be, essentially.
Hmm.
Or that's how I feel that. I feel
Okay,
that.
all right. Let's go back to the other question. So, how did your family respond to
Okay.
this? Because you're someone you're working your way through college. You're about to get a college
Hmm.
degree, which is a big deal, and
Uh-huh.
then you tell your family, you know what? I'm getting this college degree, but I'm going to be a fighter. Like, was that something that people were happy about, or was there a little bit of skepticism? Like, is this the thing that you want to do?
I mean, I had already like had another job just working as a personal trainer, and my family also has known me to be a very competitive individual with all the sports that I played. Like I played football, I wrestled, I did taekwondo, and taekwondo is very similar to kickboxing. So this wasn't too far fetched for them to grasp for me to be doing that. They could understand or they could always see me doing that. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And if other things, if that never worked out, I could have always continued working again. But essentially, both of them went hand in hand. So most of my family was very accepting, minus my mom. Nobody's mom wants to go out there and fight. But
Yeah,
I kick a lot of ass, so my mom's cool.
yeah, because you're winning. So as soon as you
Yeah,
lose,
because I'm winning, right?
yeah, if you lose, her opinion might suddenly change.
Right,
But
not gonna win. It's not gonna happen no time soon.
yeah. All right. So you're
Maybe in
at
practice.
yeah, but then she doesn't see that, so that's safe. Um,
Exactly. So we're good. On cameras, you kick ass. Practice, you get your ass kicked.
yeah.
Everything's good.
So all right, so you're at Brockport. You're transitioning back into kickboxing. Was it
Hmm.
hard to be a student and also an athlete in that way? Because it wasn't like you
Yes.
were a student athlete at Brockport where you're going, you're waking up and training with the football team. Like you had to have these two separate parts of your life. How did you
Hmm.
manage that? And was your experience at Brockport majoring in something like exercise science or kinesiology? Was that helping you, or did you just feel like these are two different things that I'm working on?
I feel like it all went hand in hand, and it was definitely helping me. Like learning the sciences and just like different. Excuse me, 1 second. Yeah. So learning like the different sciences and like philosophies behind like exercise and the study of human movement definitely helped me transfer learning those type of skills into like different workout plans and etc. that I can like emphasize in my training. Because when I was in college, I didn't have that much money, so I couldn't afford a personal trainer.
Yeah.
So a lot of times I would just take the things and concepts that I've learned in class and just apply it to my life and then come up with like different things of like how that can help me in kickboxing. So say like, being an exercise and science major, you might have to take a nutrition class. I take wellness nutrition. I learn different concepts behind different diets and I try the diets out If they work, they work. If they don't, I just don't get rid of them. But it shows me like, I can apply what I'm learning to my life.
Mhm,
So being at Brockport definitely helped me out in a way with my like kickboxing career for sure.
mhm. Was it difficult to try to find time for the training while you were a student?
Yeah, it was tough at times, to like try to balance a job and then train and then go to class all in one. But I got it done. It's just one of those things where you just have to prioritize your time to the T. Like you got to
Mhm,
know how exactly your day is about to go when you wake up from start to finish. Like from 7 a.m. to 2, you're gonna be in freaking class. You got a 30-minute window. From there, 30 minutes. You got 3 to freaking 8. You got to go to work. 8:30's practice. You get off of practice. You got a 30-minute drive home. You get home at 10. You got 2 hours to do your work. You're in bed by 12.
mhm.
And if you got time, every day is different. So it also that being there and doing all that at once also taught me to like prioritize my time to the point where like I can, add breaks here and there. That
Mhm.
might be like a Monday, but my Tuesday is going to be a little different.
Did you feel like you had to sacrifice any parts of the college experience with this goal of being a professional fighter?
Yeah, sometimes like it was I'd sacrifice like going to a party and hanging out with friends, but
Mhm,
it also showed me who my real friends were because your real friends will always support
mhm,
you. No matter how distant you may be, they're gonna support you. And also like for example, moving out here showed me that as well.
mhm. Did
Just
people
to add on the 2 questions ago.
Yeah, so this is a later question, but it might fit now. Did people know that you were an amateur fighter who was becoming successful and then transitioning to a professional fighter? Did other college students know that? And then
Yes.
how did people react? And I think the person who sent in this question is someone who trains in grappling and competes in tournaments. And I think he was probably curious from his own experience as well. In particular, he's wondering how other guys responded. Like, did people? I think when he wrote the question, he said, did people try to puff up their chest and see how tough they were in comparison to you, or was it more like something that was respected and supported?
People definitely treat you different when they know that you're like a fighter. Um, in refer to the last question, like not really. Most guys like respect you, you know what I mean, in a different way because they see you in a different light. They're like, okay, this guy might, you know, kick my ass. So let me kind of like show him a little bit more respect than the average Joe. And when people seen at the level that I were at, it definitely changed my perception in a lot of people's perspective on me. I think that's what I'm saying.
Mhm.
Like people obviously look at you differently when they
Yeah. How about people in the community where you grew up, as they learned you're being a
definitely.
fighter? Any shift there?
Um, So a lot of my friends knew about the sports that I like to do. So
Mhm,
again, a lot of it didn't surprise them until I got to the level that I'm at now. Once I
mhm.
got to this level, then it's like they were just like, "Wow, okay, then
Yeah.
you're really like serious about it. Like I can see it."
Mhm.
So
Okay.
the people do kind of treat you a little different. That's
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about training,
fair.
and motivation. So, first basic question, how often do you train? How many hours a day, how many hours a week are you actually in the gym working on getting better?
So I'd say about 6 to 7 hours a day. It's a full time job. We go from 7 a.m. in the morning to 12 in the afternoon. And then in between there, I'm working, and I'll also try to squeeze in excuse me. I also try to squeeze in like an extra workout during the day, and then at night from 8:30 to 10:30, we're back again. And during those times, so I'll just tell you the time. Let me give
Mhm.
you a Monday. A
Yeah.
Monday would be 7 a.m. to 8. We have strength and conditioning with this guy named Keith. I mean, sorry, Coach Kelvin,
You said 7
known as
AM?
the
7, 8 AM?
7
So
a.m. Yeah,
starting out all right, so starting out early, 7, 8 AM.
yeah. Monday and Wednesdays, we're there 7 a.m. with this coach called Coach Kelvin. He's known as the bandmaster. You can look him up on YouTube or check out my Instagram at Soul Carson Class if you didn't know. This guy's crazy, man. Like he has us do the most craziest workouts. I've never
Mm.
been more intimidated by a hula hoop in my life.
Yeah.
Like this guy figures out ways to make a hula hoop a really, really tough workout, but it's very functional to the sport and what
Yeah.
we do. So we're with him from like 7 to 8 a.m. And then from 8 to 10 a.m., we work with this boxing coach named uh, Coach Keith Holmes. He was a world champion. I think he was a WBCU or WBC boxing champion.
Hmm.
Guy was crazy. Like he's really good, really good. And he works us getting our hands right, has us like working different boxing combinations and techniques. I don't want to give away too much.
Yeah.
And then from 10 a.m. to 12 noon, we work with our kickboxing coach Jamal. He shows us like Muay Thai. So we're working like different kicks and punching combinations along with like knees and different like clenching techniques depending on the day. Some days we might do back work or like sparring, or we might do pad work. It varies.
Hmm.
So and then afterwards, from 8:30 to 10:30, we're working with Master Lloyd Irvin. So he's the head coach at the
Yeah.
dojo, the owner of the school. And he teaches Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, which is, for those of you who don't know, it's a ground martial art that
Mhm.
incorporates different joint manipulations techniques and submission holds and chokes.
Mhm.
And he's incredible, man. Like it's incredible. Like he was a world champion himself. He did MMA, and he also has a bunch of world champion like jiu-jitsu players.
Mhm.
Jiu-jitsu has opened up my eyes of grappling so much in comparison to wrestling because the concept behind the two sports are so different. Like
Mhm.
wrestling, my objective is to take you down and pin you or beat you by points. I
Mhm.
have two options. In jiu-jitsu, my only option is to make you submit. And to make you submit, I have to make you vulnerable. I have to either
Mhm.
choke you or put you in some sort of technique that's hyperextending one of your
Mhm.
joints. Or I have to put you in a blood choke. So I choke you windpipe, blood choke you, or put you in a, submission, like twisting your elbow backwards and hyperextending your arm, an arm
Mhm.
bar. Something crazy like that. And the mentality behind the two sports is just different. But we do that from 8:30 to 10:30. I got way off.
Yeah. So how do you stay motivated, right? Because this is even in you
Hmm.
describing what you have to do one day, that's clearly something that could be physically and mentally exhausting. So
Yeah.
how do you keep yourself coming back? I mean, you've been down there for almost I guess like you'll be down there for a year and in just a few months. But how have you kept motivated during this time?
Um, Honestly, like I have a list of things that motivate me, and some of those things are like my family. Obviously Rochester. The reason why a major reason why I do this is like my family in Rochester, like the people back at home, the people that believe in me, as well as back at home, and the people here. Because one thing that also made me choose coming to Lloyd Irvin's was like they make you feel like family, they believe in you, and they want to see you win. Just as if the people back at home in Rochester want to see me win. I have that same feeling, that same comfortability. So a lot of that keeps me motivated, as well as knowing that what success in the sport brings you. It brings you that sense of peace and that sense of stability that we're all looking for in life, and especially as martial artists. We're just looking for peace and we're looking for balance, and that's one of the reasons why a lot of martial artists do what they do, because it brings about the two.
Well, how do you balance that aspect? Because part of it you're talking about your motivations as a martial artist, and then the other part of
Hmm.
it is it's motivation as a career. You want to make money. Do you see those
Hmm.
things as being the same, or are they two different motivations?
Those two are just they're kind of like one and the same, like because they're both motivators. You know what I mean? So they
Mm-hmm.
both motivate me to get my job done. But their difference in is just like one is more materialistic and then one is more like spiritual. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah. As a career, make money, get a house, but spiritually,
Yeah,
like it brings balance, brings a lot of peace in your life because you don't have to deal with certain frustrations. Like you don't have to worry about bills. If all your bills are paid because you're kicking ass.
yeah.
So your spirit's a little settled in that department.
So thinking a little bit more about the training aspect, there's been a
Hmm.
lot more talk recently of the dangers of sparring, especially head trauma, right? So
Right, right.
how do you balance out when you're training in kickboxing and boxing the importance of going hard, getting used to being hit, to hitting another person versus knowing that long term you don't want to damage your brain. Like how do you choose how do you decide how to spar? How often do you spar? Any thoughts on that?
So we spar at our dojo. We spar twice a week, and the pace is usually dictated by like you and your partner, and depending on who you're going. If a guy's getting ready for a fight, you want to go at a good pace so that he gets workout in and he gets right. But if you're ever feeling as if like, your head hurts, you don't feel good, you don't think you should spar, then you're just allowed to take that day off and just say like, hey, I don't feel good. You mind if I do X, Y?
Mhm.
But we spar just twice,
Okay.
and that's usually like the regulation. Well, not the regulation, but that's usually like how we've been training up until this point. But
What
again, if you
yeah,
feel
when
like
yeah, I was gonna say
go ahead.
when you're sparring,
Mhm.
how often do you how how often do you go as hard as you would in a fight when sparring?
Um, every time.
Okay.
every time, unless like you're sparring someone of lower level
Okay, yeah.
or they want you to work something specifically.
Mhm,
If I'm sparring a guy who's an amateur fighter and I'm a pro, I'm not gonna try.
mhm.
You know what I mean? But if I'm sparring another pro who's a competitive individual, then it's gonna be a competitive sparring match. Unless the coaches intervene and say, "Hey, we don't want you guys doing this." Now, nobody's going. I take that back. No one's ever going at 1,000%. Like no
Yeah.
one, you're never trying to essentially kill your training.
Mhm.
I don't want to make it seem like that's what we're trying to do every
Yeah.
single time we're sparring. If anything, I would say we're going about 80% of what we actually could. Because there's always, as a fighter, how high you can go or what level you can really take it to. But when you're familiar with your sparring partners at your gym, you're probably never going to be going over 80% of what you and your partner can handle because essentially you don't want to hurt anybody. Because if you're training and you have 12 guys in the room and you hurt four of those guys, you only have eight people to spar with, right?
Mhm.
And if six of those eight people aren't in your weight class or aren't around your weight class, you only have two people to spar, you know? So it's just different factors.
Do you enjoy sparring still?
Yeah, I enjoy sparring.
What about
Sparring,
it do you
sparring,
enjoy?
the competitiveness, and it's
Okay.
almost like playing a game. You know, playing a game in a sense where it's a physical chess match. So I'm just trying to come up with different moves to beat the next move that you make. You know,
Oh,
but
okay,
I want to
actually,
always try to be one step ahead of you.
that's a question that I missed earlier that I think actually is an interesting one, particularly with you. So
Mm-hmm,
your style isn't generic, right? Your striking style, there's a lot of very classic Muay Thai fighters or very classic boxers, or you see wrestlers that
mm-hmm.
get into boxing. You have a very particular striking style. You throw a lot of kicks, you use your distance. You said that you like the creativity that you can employ when striking. How did you find your style? Were there certain people that you tried to model yourself after? Was it just playing around in the gym? Like how did you end up with the style that you currently have?
Oh man, to be honest with you, to answer that question, it's kind of like all of the above. Because
Okay.
I feel like I've been around and I've trained at so many different gyms. Like besides training at Bedrock in Rochester, I worked at different boxing gyms with different boxing coaches like Charles Murray and Robert Giles, and I've also worked with the coaches at Bedrock like the John Farrar and his son. Um, and I've also worked in Amsterdam, not Amsterdam, but I've gone to the Netherlands to work in Utrecht with a coach named Fred Royals. I worked out with some guys over there, and I also worked out with different coaches in Thailand as well as in Jersey. So working with different coaches all over different areas, and like coming from the background of doing like Taekwondo has just kind of um, made my style what it is today, as well as watching like older kickboxers and fighters like Raymond Daniels and Peter Sugarfoot Cunningham or like Floyd Mayweather and newer age boxers like Lloyd Machenko or Devin Hanley, just different fighters that I see. I also try to like implement that into my style. I
Okay.
just kind of take what I learned in the past and what I learned in the future, just put it in a box, and I just shake it up, and
Mhm.
that's what you're gonna get.
Yeah. All right. So, last question in regards to the training aspect. Um,
hmm
so one of the things that's interesting about MMA and grappling is that you see people of all genders training together in a gym, right? There's women training
hmm
alongside men. That's different than other sports where you often see that division where here's the men's basketball team, here's the women's basketball team. Um, so I'm curious. I don't know how it is at Lloyd Irving's, but I know back in Rochester when you were at Bedrock, everyone trains together.
hmm
What's your experience like? It's kind of a vague question, but one of the students was just curious. What's it like training with women at gyms at all, also instead of having that division? Has that changed the way you understand what women can do? Like, any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So to answer that question, Well, first of all, the pros train with the pros, and the amateur fighters train with the amateur fighters. But and well, the amateur fighters and like the regular class people. The
Hmm.
class is kind of open to anyone who wants to come in because at like typical striking class is tailored for regular people, but it's also a good workout for amateur fighters and someone who just wants to come in because you're not doing too much. But the coaches know if you're a pro fighter, when you come into class, you might have to do a little bit.
Hmm.
But the pros work with the pros, the amateurs work with the amateurs. And when it comes to the sexes, um, it's still the same. It's not a difference. It's not like female
Yeah.
pros only work over here, and everybody works together. And it's just shown me that women can do just whatever men do. Because there's some women out there that'll kick
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
ass. There's some women out there that kick your ass. Trust me, I met a few. As good as I am, I met.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's one of those important lessons that by not
Mhm,
having the division, right? By not saying women can only train with women, that allows guys who are not good at martial arts at all to be like, "Oh yeah, I would beat them if I were training with them." But when you
yeah.
see a fighter, I mean, a obvious example, Amanda Nunes from the UFC, she's going to beat the
hmm
majority of guys, right? Like it doesn't
Yeah, she's she's
until you
she's
reach
kicking
that
a lot
top
of
level
ass.
of guys, she's going to beat you. There's
hmm
no, but it's easier when you don't have that
Yeah.
mixing to be like, oh, people are different skills, but gender is the biggest divide.
Right, right. It's like it shows you like gender isn't that much of a huge influence
Mhm,
when it comes to certain parts of the fight or certain variables.
mhm.
Because
All right,
she's a beast. She's a
yeah,
beast.
let's talk about the fight itself, and then let's speed through these questions because I really want to get to your experience, kind of traveling around and training in different countries, and then some big questions that students ask, kind of more abstract ones. But just a few
Okay.
questions about the fight itself. First one, how do you mentally prepare for a fight? Do you have any pre-fight rituals, routines, superstitions that you follow? How do you get your mind in the right state for a fight?
I just do a lot of affirmations in the morning and meditation in the morning and night, and then before I go out to fight, I just meditate a little bit. Just take some time, get some deep thoughts, like try to put myself in a good positive headspace going forward into my training or into the fight. And sometimes I like to envision the fight as well, just seeing myself doing certain techniques or being in certain situations and how I get out of it. It just gives me those mental reps that you need moving into the fight, which gives you more confidence in different scenarios.
Do you still get nervous?
Yeah,
Mhm. And that's,
it's
do you
it's
think that's,
normal. You
yeah.
I was gonna say it's normal. Like you being a human and you're about to do something as exciting as fighting, you're going to be a little nervous.
Yeah, it might
Not that
actually be bad
nerves are
if
a bad.
it might be bad if you don't have any nerves because it shows that you're a little bit,
Yeah,
yeah.
you might be a little too lax. And if you think about it, your nerves kind of give you a little bit more of a more stronger connection to yourself. If you think about it, because when you're nervous, right, you
Mhm.
kind of feel jumpy. You feel jumpy because you feel your body a lot more. So any
Yeah.
little slight movement, you might just be over exaggerated. That
Mhm.
nervousness may help you in a fight because you might be in a situation where you have to make a quick decision. Should I slip this punch or should I block? And that slip or block could be the difference from you doing a successful counter or you getting hit. If you're not as nervous, you might not move,
Mhm.
or you might not have as much what's the word? I don't know. You might not have as much fear of the consequence
Yeah, yeah.
if you do it wrong. If you choose the wrong thing.
What are your thoughts on trash talking? So I know the students watched the video, and in the video they got to
Uh-huh.
see you have that build up with the
uh-huh.
fight, one of the fighters who came down where you were talking to them at the weigh-in. Um,
hmm
how do you? I mean, some people hate trash talking; they don't think it's part of the sport.
hmm
Other people think it's a key aspect. What are your thoughts on trash talking? How do you approach it?
I like it. I think it's like a good idea, because it helps you get in that guy's head and it helps you understand, like, okay, what is he thinking or how does he feel? It helps you gauge where they're at mentally because you're not fighting them yet, you know.
Mhm.
And I also feel like trash talking, if you can do it and you're good at it and you have it like good intention behind it, you can back up what you say, then it's good. It helps you out. People don't like it because they don't understand that it is a part of combat sports because
Mhm.
we're fighting. We're entertainers, and what the entertainer does is get your attention and entertain you.
Mhm.
So when it comes to trash talking, I have to get people's attention. I have to get people looking at me to know what's about to go on. I have to sell the fight essentially. And trash talking helps you sell the fight
So
because people are going to want.
Do you believe what you're saying? Are you caught up in what you're saying, or is it just a performance to get inside the other person's head? Do you actually feel yourself getting excited or angry or hyped for the fight by saying certain things, or is it really you're going to try to figure out something and get the other person out of their game, or maybe both?
I'm figuring out something to get them out of their game, and it's an affirmation I'm telling myself because I do believe what I'm going to do.
Mhm.
I never tell you something I'm not going to do, but I will say little things to get in your head. Like I might tell an opponent, like, "Man, you look like you work out like twice a day. Like that's all you do. You just work out like twice a day." And that might,
That doesn't
some
sound
guys
twice a day doesn't sound bad.
exactly, but to some guys, if you tell that to them, it's
Yeah,
gonna bug them because they're like, "Wait a minute, like, damn, that's all I do is just work out twice a day.
yeah,
What is he saying?" Like, that bothers
yeah.
some people. Or,
Yeah,
someone
that
who's
was my
very
thought when you said that. I was like, "That doesn't sound bad
yeah.
work."
You have someone who is very like hyper masculine. They feel very strong, proud of themselves. They work out
Yeah.
nonstop. They might feel like, oh man, this person's trying to like say I look weak. Either way, though, it gets in their head. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? But if it doesn't, it doesn't. But at the same time, it's like it just kind of it's fun to do. Also, I like doing it. I like trash talking. It's fun to do. Now, I'm not gonna say every single opponent I trash talk, but if you're giving me a demeanor that lets me know I can intimidate you, I'm gonna
Mhm. Have you ever been offended by something as someone has said to you?
try. Not that I can think of because I don't take it personally. Like I was saying before, like we're entertainers in the entertainment business. I just kind of sometimes look at us as actors.
So
So what people may
you can
say,
kinda compartmentalize it then and say, "This is the I don't even have to take it personally because this I know they're doing what I'm
yeah,
doing." Is there a
yeah,
line
they're
that you
just trying to
think
get under my skin.
is there a line that you think should not be crossed in trash talking, or is it anything goes?
I don't think. I mean, in life, stuff ain't fair. I'm not gonna sit here and try to like talk about someone's dead mother or uncle or
Mhm.
stuff. You know what I mean? That's probably where I would draw the line. But I'm not gonna put it past anybody trying to take it there or anyone in general because you can't stop them
Yeah.
essentially. Like I think it should just go as far as like how you feel about the other person, like and how the fight is gonna go, because essentially that's what it's about.
Mhm.
Now, if you're sitting here like, trying to say malicious things about people's family members, then you better be able to back up what you're gonna say. But again, you can't control that.
Does race come up often in trash talking? Because I know that's one of the areas that's been controversial in the even in the UFC. You see buildups where
Mhm.
people will say something that's specifically about the other person's the country they're from or their racial background. Is that something that you've seen in fighting, where that's part of trash talking, or have you not really encountered that?
No, I haven't really encountered that. I mean, I had this Asian guy made a racist joke and said I look like Bow Wow because I had braids, but that's just as far as it's gone. Like, it's
Yeah.
never like anything like, oh, you're from America, like, they never called me the N word or said anything crazy like that. Not like what you may see in like UFC, but again, you got to factor in like that's a bigger market, bigger people. Maybe your trash talking has to be a little bit of level above.
Yeah.
If you
All
think
right.
about it.
So how about the fight itself?
Mhm.
This is probably challenging, but can you describe what it feels like when you're actually you're actually in the ring or in the cage and you're fighting against someone else? What is that
Um,
what is that like? And this I mean
uh,
this is a really hard one to capture that feeling, right? But
yeah.
what is it what can you even do you even know what's going on, or is it more like an out of body experience? Like what are you feeling in there?
Oh man, that's such a that is a tough question to answer because I don't want to give you such a vague description. So as best I can describe it, it's it's like being in a movie, but you're in control of this movie. It's like you're
Mhm.
you're in a movie, but like imagine you're in a movie theater behind, you got your vision on, like you're looking at the screen, but you're the one in control. And like you have such an adrenaline rush going on. And I don't know if it's a fight thing, but how people say a lot of fighters have like high pain tolerance.
Yeah.
As a fighter, you do because a lot of hits you don't feel. You might feel a blunt force, but you don't necessarily feel like the pain. It's not like a pinch or a sting, but you do
Mhm.
feel things. Um, because I've won most of my fights, I always feel good, especially like when I'm in the zone and everything's landing and going the way that I want. It's almost like things are moving in slow motion
Okay. Yeah.
because you're having such a like in the zone moment, and your adrenaline's pumping, and you just have so much control. If you can maintain a certain breath and control your breathing, that also helps. But you feel like when you reach that point when you're in the zone, you just feel like you're just in control of everything going on. It's also very exciting because if the crowd's always loud, got the cool little lights on, and
Mhm.
it's kind of scary too at times because you have someone in front of your
Are
face
you
kind of
aware? Are you
knocking you
aware
out.
while you're fighting of everyone watching you? Can like part of your mind being like, I'm putting on a performance for these people and I want it to be exciting, or do you have to just block that out?
You got to block that out because you don't want to focus too much on that. Because if you focus too much on that, you're not focusing on the person in front of
Mhm.
you. So I focus on the person in front of me. I'm aware that there's a crowd there, but I don't try to look. I don't try to think about it. I just try to focus on the person in front
Have you taken a, I guess, two parts of the same question. First, have you been hit in a fight? Um, have you ever taken a hit in a fight that really stunned you and you knew that you were hurt, or have you managed to avoid that so far?
of me. I've taken some shots in some fights that I knew hurt, and but I've recovered.
Hmm. Have you ever felt bad about hurting someone else in a fight? Or is that
Um,
it's part of the game, you're both entering it, so that's just what goes on?
it's just what goes on. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where it's like it's better you than me. You know what I mean? Because we
Mhm.
both know we signed up for it. We both know what we're about to do. We both know what we're getting into. Like it's kind of like either you get hurt or I do, and I'm not. I don't want it to be me. So you can't feel too bad.
Mhm. Okay, all right, final question. This is kind of a funny one, but I think it's actually a pretty good one that a student sent in. Does being undefeated Do you feel the pressure of being undefeated? Is that something that you often think about as being like, I have to keep living up to this, keeping the zero on my record? Or is it more something you just, I guess actually that's the question they asked. How does it feel? Does it create pressure for you?
You can't put no more pressure externally on yourself than internally what you allow to. So the only pressure that I feel is the pressure I put upon myself. I do hold myself to a high standard, and I feel like I'm of high value, so I need to maintain that. But losing isn't the worst thing.
Mhm.
Being remembered as the best and being the greatest fighter that I can be is what's more important.
Okay, final question. Then I want to talk more about kind of your travels and some of your bigger goals. Um,
Mhm.
how did you decide to change? I guess I never asked this before. How did you decide to transition from kickboxing, where you're having a lot of success, now you're adding this other part of your game. You're training and grappling. You're going into MMA. You were having a lot of success in kickboxing. Why the transition?
The money and where I seen the sport of kickboxing going. So when it comes to the money, the pay is a lot more in America, and I want to make a living doing martial arts. And I see like with MMA, you can make a lot of money, and you don't have to put as much wear and tear in your body as you do with the kickboxing. And when it comes to what was the question again?
That's a good question. What did I ask? Oh yeah, just why did you make that transition? So
Oh,
it sounds like a lot of it was a business decision.
yeah, my bad. So the business decision, and it was also when it came to where I seen kickboxing going. That's where I was. Lost my
Yeah.
train of thought. So when I seen where kickboxing was going, so with kickboxing, a lot of people don't watch it as much as they watch mixed martial arts.
Yeah.
You know, and especially here in America, a lot of people don't know about it. So if a lot of people don't know about it, a lot of people don't come. If a lot of people don't come to the shows, then you may not have a show because for the promoters to put on the shows, they need people to come because they need to be able to, sell tickets to make money. If nobody's watching kickboxing, then eventually the sport dies out with any sport. If nobody's paying attention to it, then it doesn't really give you as much of the competitive edge, or it takes away one of those variables of your competitive
Okay, that actually transitions perfectly to my next question. So I'm glad you gave that answer. You've
edge.
traveled around the world both competing and training. So in the
Hmm.
United States, kickboxing is not the most popular sport. Boxing's more popular, MMA is more popular, but you've gone to
Hmm.
places like the Netherlands, you've gone to places like Thailand where there is that real culture that surrounds kickboxing and Muay Thai. Um, does it feel different to train in those places where
Yes.
people actually do pay attention to the sport? Like how
Yeah.
does it feel?
It feels like you're at a higher level in a place where there's a lot more eyes on it. So if like if kickboxing is the more popular thing in say the Netherlands, then the quality of gyms are going to be a lot better. You're going to have way more people. You're going to have better coaching because more people pay attention to that sport and there's more people involved. You know, you're not going to necessarily find the best basketball coaches in Nigeria, not
Mhm.
Nigeria, Africa, but in a country, yeah, like I said, like Nigeria,
Yeah.
Africa, you're not going to
Mhm.
find. You may find great coaches, but you're more than likely to find those in the states because we have the NBA here.
Yeah.
Or even when you look into like combat sports, if you look at boxing, if you want to find some of the best boxing coaches, you're probably going to go with that. You're going to go somewhere where that sport is popular in that country because you're going to find the best coaches. And when it came to kickboxing, that's why I traveled to places like the Netherlands and places like Thailand because that's where some of the best coaches were at. And when it came to the culture, more people respected it. There were a lot more events going on in the area, and people seen it as as that just as something that was just as known as say like soccer or playing football or basketball, like I said prior.
Mhm. All right, so you've been I mean, it's kind of an amazing thing to get to travel around the world for anyone, much less
Mhm.
through your sport bringing you around the world. I kind of like this question. It's a vague one, but someone said, "What's the most interesting or just surprising experience you've had in another country?" And they don't
Um,
even say training or not, so I guess anything. It could be training related, but just in general, do you have any good story from your experience traveling
oh
abroad?
man, I keep it PG for you, but I went to this thing called the ping pong show in Thailand. That was pretty crazy. That was pretty crazy. I'm not gonna say too much, but you guys
Okay.
can Google that.
Okay.
I went there in Thailand. That was pretty nice. What else? That was a pretty crazy experience outside of training. Um,
What about
that's
inside?
pretty much all.
What about inside of training? Right. So you're in the Netherlands.
Uh,
Does was there anything that surprised you about differences between training in a Dutch kickboxing school versus here in the in Rochester, or training in a Muay Thai gym in Thailand versus in Rochester? Was there anything that kind of surprised you or stood out to you?
yes, the style of how everything is taught and like the itineraries of class or how the coaches ran the class. Like I noticed, like the styles in the Netherlands was more heavily focused on basic boxing and basic kicks, but very combining them a lot more fluently than say like the American style of kickboxing, where the stance is very different and the boxing and the kicks are a little bit more flashy. In the Netherlands, they're a little bit more basic and they keep it simple using two different kicks, which is a teep or a push kick, and a low kick and a high kick, which is a low kick to the legs, doing a roundhouse kick, hitting with your shin, or a kick to the head. Netherlands, they keep it real basic. They don't do too many crazy things, and they box a lot. When you look at the Thailand style of kickboxing, they do just as much kickboxing, but they also incorporate your elbows and the knees and the clinching aspect of the game as well. And they're also scored very differently of the three. With like Muay Thai, the rules are very different compared to the rules of the Netherlands style of kickboxing. So yeah.
Okay. You mentioned earlier in trash talking, you haven't encountered a lot of cases where you've encountered a lot of racism in trash talking, or even where race is part of the story. In traveling around the world and competing in kickboxing, has race been an issue at all? Have you seen people had an expectation of how you're going to fight, who you are based on your skin color? Have you seen it come up with other fighters, or is fighting this place where maybe it just hasn't appeared as it would in other areas of society?
Well, what I've seen in kickboxing is not as strong. It's not as if like race people are gonna judge you or it's gonna have an extremely huge influence. Usually, it's more or less nationality. You
Okay.
know, so if you're from this specific country, then I'm gonna assume your style is like X, Y. Most people don't look at race, and it's hard to judge, especially say like if you come from America, where we're like a mixing pot.
Mhm.
You know, someone might look at us and they can't really judge how the style is going to be. But say if like you're a kickboxer from Europe or European country like Russia or
Mhm.
um Holland or etc., I'm going to assume your style is this way compared to if you're a kickboxer from America. I'm going to have an idea like you're going to fight like this.
Yeah,
Race
so you're
wouldn't
looking more
necessarily play
it's
a
more
factor.
about the fight culture from the region
Yeah,
rather than the person's skin
yeah,
color. So you haven't really seen race being a big factor in the fight game.
yeah. exactly. Combat sports or like martial arts in general, from my experience, I've learned that it's one of those places where race people are kind of blind to a lot of.
Hmm.
Not necessarily blind to race, but you don't you don't look as deeply into it. You look at
Okay.
more or less like the
Yeah,
competitive
so
stuff.
you've found more equity or equality in fighting.
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
it's actually okay. Um all right, so let's think a little bit about bigger goals and then we'll get to abstract questions because I know I said I'd keep you about 50 minutes. So I'm gonna speed through these. Um
Okay.
how, how do you
That was
know
a
when
great
to
conversation.
Yeah, I know we could talk. I could interview for the whole day, but I want to make sure I stick to my promise, and also I'm going to make everyone watch it. So, how do you know when to stop?
I mean, I guess when I stop having fun with it, and when my body like is telling me like, all right, you got this, you're not gonna be able to keep doing it. And third point is when I reach my goal. My
Mhm.
goal is to just, win a UFC world title, be undefeated, open up a gym or a few franchise gyms, and once I get to that point, then I'll know, like I've reached the goal.
What
You
weight
know,
class are you competing in MMA?
145.
Okay, how tall are you?
I'm 6'1".
Okay, this wasn't a question, but I'm curious. So, what's the lightest you've competed at in kickboxing?
155.
Okay, so what are your thoughts on weight cutting? So this is a practice
Um.
that for people who
Mhm.
follow MMA are very aware of it, or anyone coming from a wrestling background. For people who do not, it's kind of a strange thing when you first hear about it, right? There's a fighter, they're going to
Right.
compete at 145 pounds, but they don't walk around at 145 pounds, right? You drop a ton of weight to get to the scale, and then you have to rehydrate. Um,
Right.
have you ever cut that much weight? And what, just in general, is that something that worries you? How do you feel about this process?
I feel like if you follow the process right and you follow the right nutritional steps to get to that weight, you'll be just fine. You'll have no problem. One thing I've noticed at being at this level of the profession and being at this gym, they have nutritional coaches and weight cutting specialists to help you with that process so that it makes it a lot more easier and smoother for you. And also staying in shape helps you maintain a good weight so you don't have to cut that much leading up to the fight. I know that there's dangers behind it, but the dangers usually happen if you're doing something wrong. If
Mhm.
you're not supposed to be fighting at that weight, you shouldn't be fighting. And the great thing we do at our gym is doing something in a DECA scan, where it scans your body fat composition and your body mass index and et cetera to let you know what your body can handle. So you don't have situations where a guy weighs like 170 and he's trying to fight at 125 pounds,
Mhm.
and cutting that weight in like 4 days.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting example of how advantage builds to more advantage, right? So being a good
Hmm.
fighter at a good gym gives you all these advantages that someone trying to work their way up doesn't have, right? You have access to someone who can teach you how to cut weight properly. You have access to someone who's
Right.
going to be able to provide these type of scans, who can give you advice on nutrition, how to cut, how much to cut the day before, how much to cut the week before. Otherwise, like you're saying, the problems come when you're figuring it out yourself. So as a fighter coming up the
Yeah.
ranks, it's actually a lot harder if you don't have those resources.
Exactly. If you don't have those resources, and like, you're gonna have a hard time just trying to like do it on your own. It's better when you have people in that specific area doing their job because that's the only job they know. It's
All
like
right.
you wouldn't hire a painter to fix your steps.
Yeah. Yeah. Unless unless you can only afford one person to do all the work, right? And then you have that one
Right.
person who has to paint and fix the roof and fix the steps versus you're at a
Hmm.
place where you're allowed to have, I mean, you have a coach just from 7 to 8 a.m. who just does strength and conditioning, right? So you have very
Hmm.
specialized people for each aspect.
Yeah.
Um,
So I'm very blessed to be where I'm at.
yeah. So I like this question a lot. Do you think it will be difficult to not be a fighter when you retire, right? So I think what they're getting at is, to what degree is this part of your identity? You've been doing this for so long that you are Michael Carson, who competes in kickboxing and now MMA. Like, is it strange to imagine not having that be part of your story?
No, because I know it's a part of the story. I know this doesn't last forever.
Mhm.
Eventually, like I'm gonna have to stop fighting one day. But when that day comes, I'll know that I'll have everything else lined in place to where I want to be in life. So I won't need to necessarily worry about that. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm pretty sure when I retire, I may miss doing that sport, but
Mhm.
that's okay. It's just a memory that you have.
Mhm.
And I just feel like I'll know I'm done with it when my body tells
Yeah, I mean, because that's one of those stories that we often see in combat sport of the person who sticks around a little bit too long because they're just not ready to give it
me.
up,
Right.
right? And keeps coming back to have one more fight, one more fight.
Hmm.
But you think, I mean, it's hard, right? Because you're looking ahead in the future, but you think you're going to be able to say, "This is my time. I'll move on to the next stage of my life."
Yeah, I have it set in my head. You know what I mean? I just like I have an idea in my head where I want to go and like um when I want to stop. So I feel like when I get to that age, when I'm there, I'll definitely know for sure. Like, okay, how do I feel? Like, is this something I want to keep doing? Where I'm at in the game? Because let's say if someone's competing and they do it until they're like 32 and they're not seeing a dime from it, then maybe they should switch
Mhm.
careers. But if someone's like me, by the time they're 32 and they're making well over say 600K a year and they're in a good spot in life,
Mhm.
then you can maybe see yourself doing it a little bit longer, but only if you reach those goals that you want.
Mhm.
You know.
Okay, all right. Next questions. I like these. These are a
Mhm.
little bit bigger questions. What would you say to someone who finds boxing or kickboxing or MMA to be violent and barbaric? Would you,
Um,
yeah, how would you respond to someone?
Well, you're not wrong. It is violent, it
Yeah.
has barbaric moments, but it's a part of an art that, you may just not completely understand. Because if you look at it from a naked eye of not knowing anything about combat sports or martial arts, then yeah, it does look kind of crazy. But if you took in martial arts, you know different moves, different techniques, different terminologies, and different philosophies behind fighting in combat sports. You'll see it in a light where, oh, this person is using this move, or this person is fighting in this style, or this person is moving in this way. If two people see two people fighting on the, I'm sorry, if two people are just walking down the street, like you and your girlfriend, if you guys have never seen a combat sport a day in your life, and you see two guys fighting, you're gonna look like, oh man, that's crazy, right? Not
Mhm.
to you specifically,
Yeah, but someone,
you
yeah.
might say like, "Oh, yeah, that's so crazy." But if you have two martial artists walking down the street, they might look at those two people fighting and think to themselves like, "Oh man, that person must be a great boxer because when they were fighting, they were using a lot of head movement, they were flipping, they were
Yeah.
having really good clean punches." And the other person, they had just been like, wailing and flinging their arm. So
Yeah.
you kind of view fighting in a different light.
Yeah,
That makes
that's an interesting answer. So do you think that the main difference between a fight, a fight either in a gym where you're training or a fight in a cage where it's an actual scheduled match versus walking down the
sense.
street, you see two people getting in a fight, is the only difference the skill levels, or is there something else different about that? Like, because if you see someone, if you walk outside right now and you see two people just hitting each other, like it seems like there's still you'll probably have a different reaction than if you're in the gym and you see two people hitting each other, right?
Yeah, I mean the environment is totally different. One is probably more of an acceptable place to do it, and the other one, just kind of like very sporadic out there. And what was your other question you asked me?
Yeah, no, I was just curious if the main thing is the skill of the two people doing it, or if there's something about the setting and like the emotions that make one more acceptable and one not acceptable. Because it's interesting, because it could be the exact same thing, and one of them you see every day, every 2 days that you go sparring, you're going to see people punching and kicking each other. But if you go outside your house, it's probably going to be a lot more exciting if you see two people, random people hitting each other. Like you're going to react in a different way.
Yeah, well, yeah, you would react in a different way. And one, the skill level is very different, so that
Mhm.
dictates it too. In a way, you can watch a fight in a gym and it's kind of boring because like
Yeah,
it's more technique being applied. You've seen
yeah,
it enough compared to like a fight in the street is very like spontaneous, and it can be a
yeah,
little exciting depending on where you're at.
yeah,
And when it comes to skill level, it's obviously a huge skill level. Some people can fight, and some people can't,
yeah.
or
All
they're
right.
being trained and they know how to fight, and some people haven't
Okay, two more questions. Second and last one.
been.
Do you engage in any other high risk activities? So, fighting is something
um,
that there's obviously adrenaline, there's risk involved. Is this the only
mhm.
thing, or are you kind of like a person who seeks out that stuff, or maybe the rest of your life you play it very safe? Like, is this
um,
is this a pattern, or is this the exception?
Good question, man. Good question. I mean, I do like to do high risk stuff like, snowboard or like skydiving. I like to do that stuff for fun, but usually most of my hobbies are just like very safe things, like reading, playing pool, playing video games,
Okay.
stuff where I'm not putting my body on the line. But I do enjoy every now and then like a high risk activity, like something what I just mentioned.
Okay. All right. Final one.
Mhm.
What advice would you give to someone who's thinking about going this path? Whether it's going to be professional kickboxer, let's just say MMA
Mhm.
at this point. If there's someone who has been training and grappling or boxing, and they're in college now and they're trying to think, is this what I really want to do? What advice would you give?
Make sure you have a plan mapped out. Like, make sure you have a plan. If this is something you want to do, make sure you have a plan, and just know you're gonna have to like really grind it out. It's not going to be a walk in the park because when you do a sport like mixed martial arts, you're not just competing with yourself. You're not just competing with the people in your area. You're competing with the world. It's not like a college sport. We're competing with other colleges and a conference. You're competing with the world. It's you against everybody, essentially. So you have to mentally have that in the back of your mind, and you have to have a plan. You have to know where you're going, and you have to have an idea of what's going to happen and how you're going to get that done. You know, have a step by step process laid out. Have something close. Because you don't want to just go into a fight empty handed with nothing in mind or no sort of plan. If you want to be a fighter, you got to be ready to fight like you got to have just like going in the ring. You got to have some sort of idea of what you're going to do or what moves you're good at.
Mm-hmm. Okay, all right, I lied. I have one more question.
Go
So,
ahead.
I'm just curious. What's you're saying? You have to have a plan. You have to have an idea of where you're going. Do you know what's
Mhm.
next for you? And the reason I ask that is so with COVID, people have seen that the UFC has managed to continue to hold events, but smaller
Mhm.
organizations have shut down, right? Because it's more difficult for them to be able to set up a health protocol that convinces the athletic commission that it's safe. Smaller organizations
Mhm.
can't travel around the world and have bubbles and testing. So, do you know? I mean, you've been training now, like very committed for the last few months. Do you know when you'll be able to fight again? When you'll have a chance to compete?
I'm not 100% sure yet. We're just gonna. It's coming though.
Okay,
We got something lined up in the future, but I can't tell you guys too much until I get things.
until it's actually signed.
So, yeah, till things are solidified. I don't want to make any promises to anybody, but just stay tuned. We may
Okay,
have
all
something
right.
coming
When
up
you
in the
when
later
you
spring.
yeah, when you have an update, send it my way. I'll share it with the class because
Oh,
it's always exciting.
definitely,
Thank you
definitely,
again for stopping by. This is kind of I think this is the third year in a row, so a little bit of a tradition.
yeah,
Um,
man.
always one of the conversations I enjoy. So this is awesome. I'm going to share this with the class right after. I'll share a copy of the video with you if you want to send it to anyone. Kind of fun to hear your thoughts on things. So, but yeah, thanks for making the time. As you detailed, you've got a busy and exhausting schedule. So we appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, man. Thanks again for having me, man. I'll see you guys later.
Yeah, I'll see you again next year for the same time, same place.
All right, all
All
right.
right,
Peace.
I'll see you.